It was the summer of 2013. I had just turned 34 and was living in central Ohio, trying to keep my life together after everything had fallen apart. The divorce had gone through that March, and it had taken a chunk out of me I didn't think I'd ever get back. I was still living in the house we used to share, though everything inside it felt empty, like it had been drained of color and sound. Every little creak reminded me of her. Even the dog had gone with her, which made the place feel less like a home and more like a building I slept in. I worked a construction job, framing mostly, paid well enough, and the guys on the crew were fine, but I wasn't really close to any of them. I kept to myself. I didn't drink much anymore either, not after that first messy month after the papers were signed. I just worked and came home, sometimes stopping at the gas station for a sandwich or a coffee, then just laying in bed with the TV on, volume low. Around mid-June, I started thinking more and more about getting out for a few days, just disappearing into the woods with my pack and tent and seeing if being away from everything would do something good for my head. I'd done a lot of camping as a kid, Boy Scouts, family road trips, that sort of thing. Always loved it. I hadn't done it much as an adult, though. Life always got in the way. One Friday morning before work, I pulled out an old atlas and started flipping through the pages, looking for somewhere quiet and off the beaten path. I settled on Wayne National Forest, about 3 hours southeast of Columbus. Big place, not too touristy, and far enough that it felt like I'd really gone somewhere. I didn't want to camp in a public site with picnic tables and fire rings. I wanted to be deep in the trees, where I wouldn't see or hear another soul. I took the next Thursday and Friday off work, packed up my gear that Wednesday night: tent, sleeping bag, stove, canned food, water filter, knife, matches, flashlight, the usual. I didn't tell anyone I was going. No one would have cared much anyway. I left before sunrise on Thursday, driving south in my beat-up Toyota Tacoma, enjoying the cool air and empty roads. I reached the forest around mid-morning, parked on a gravel pull-off where the map said an old logging trail cut through the trees, and hiked in. The air smelled good, like pine and damp earth, and there was no one around for miles. I walked for about 4 hours before I found a clearing just big enough for my tent. The ground was soft, and there was a little rise nearby that gave me a view through the trees, eastward. Felt perfect, like I'd stepped out of my life and into some forgotten place. I set up camp, made some coffee on my little stove, and sat on a rock with my boots off, watching the breeze move through the branches. I stayed like that for a long time, not really thinking about anything. That night, I made some beans and rice, read a few pages from an old paperback I'd brought, and went to bed not long after sunset. I was tired from the hike and the fresh air. I slept hard. The first night was fine. I woke up a few times to sounds, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, but that's normal out there. Animals moving around. You get used to it. I wasn't scared. The next day I spent exploring. I left most of my gear at the site and followed a dry creek bed for a few miles, then cut north until I reached a rocky outcrop. From there, I could see a long stretch of forest in every direction. Not a building or a person in sight. That was what I wanted.
No voices.
No traffic. No reminders of anything. Just trees and sky. I got back to camp late in the afternoon and noticed something weird right away. One of the tent stakes was pulled out. Not all the way, just enough that one corner of the tent had gone loose and folded a little. I was sure I'd set it properly the day before. I always double-check my setup. It wasn't windy while I was gone either. The air had been dead still all day. Still, I didn't think too much of it. Maybe I messed up. I hammered it back in, tightened the lines, and didn't let my mind wander about it. But I didn't sleep as well that night. The second night, I woke up sometime after midnight. I didn't know why at first. Everything was quiet, no wind, no rain, no animals. Just the faint sound of the woods breathing. I stayed there, staring up at the black curve of the tent's ceiling, listening hard. I didn't hear anything at first. Then I caught it, this low, steady sound. Not quite footsteps, more like pressure on the ground. Like something large was shifting its weight slowly just outside the tent. It wasn't close, maybe 20 feet off. I held my breath. The sound came again. A soft, deliberate crunch, like a boot on dry leaves. Then nothing. Silence. Then another. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. It was someone walking slowly in a circle around my tent. I stayed completely still. I didn't have a gun. I never brought one camping. Just a fixed blade knife I used for cooking and wood. My flashlight was in the side pocket of my sleeping bag. I didn't reach for it. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want whoever it was to know I was awake. The footsteps stopped after a while. I couldn't say how long. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 30. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion or stress. I don't remember the moment I drifted off, just that I woke up feeling drained and cold, with a dry mouth and a knot in my gut. The area outside looked normal in the morning. No tracks, no broken branches, no sign that anyone had been there. I kept telling myself it was probably a deer or something, but I'd heard deer before. This was different, heavier, slower. I stayed in camp that day, half thinking I'd pack up and head back. But I didn't. I told myself I was overreacting. I made a fire, boiled water for coffee, whittled a stick down to a point for no real reason, just to keep my hands busy. I didn't explore or hike. I stayed close. That afternoon, I saw something across the clearing. Just a flicker, like movement behind the trees. I stared for a long time but didn't see anything again. No sound. No birds either, now that I thought about it. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. At dusk, I gathered more firewood and made a bigger fire than usual. I didn't want to sit in the dark. I ate fast and kept my flashlight in my hand while I sat by the flames. The woods pressed in around me like a wall. I didn't hear anything, but I felt watched. I didn't sleep at all that third night. Every sound made me freeze. I heard twigs snapping again, something closer than before. Once, I swore I heard breathing, like a slow exhale. I gripped the knife under my blanket and waited. At one point, I flicked on my flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. Nothing, just trunks and branches and shadows. Then I saw it, a shape, not a full figure, just part of one. Behind a tree, maybe 30 feet away, I saw the edge of a shoulder and part of a leg. Someone was standing there, barely visible, not moving. I turned the light off immediately. I didn't want them to know I'd seen them. I lay there, heart thudding so hard I thought it would give me away. I waited. I didn't hear retreating footsteps. I didn't hear anything. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. When I woke up, the sun was just coming up. My fire was cold ash. I unzipped the tent and stepped out into the damp morning air. That's when I saw the footprints, clear as day, in the soft dirt, about 15 feet from my tent. They weren't mine. Too big, wider. The pattern on the sole was strange too, more like a work boot than a hiking boot. And they weren't walking away. They were just there, like someone had stood in one spot watching. I packed up immediately, threw everything into my pack, took down the tent in record time, and started hiking back the way I came. I didn't even eat. I just wanted to get out of those woods. After about an hour of fast hiking, I stopped to catch my breath and check the map. I had about 2 miles to go when I saw something ahead on the trail. A shape. It was a man. He was standing off to the side of the path, facing away from me, maybe 40 yards ahead. He wasn't moving, just standing there. He wore a dark jacket and jeans. Something about the way he was standing was all wrong. Too still, too deliberate, like he was waiting. I backed up slowly and stepped off the trail, moving quietly into the underbrush. I made a wide circle through the trees, cutting parallel to the trail for a while, heart pounding the whole time. I didn't run. I moved steady and quiet. Eventually, I made it back to the road. My truck was untouched. I got in, locked the doors, and started driving without looking back. I didn't tell anyone about it. Who would I tell? The cops? What would I say? That I saw a man in the woods? That someone might have watched me while I slept? No laws against being creepy in the woods. I've never gone camping alone since. I still think about it, though. Not every day, but more than I'd like to admit. I wonder if he was following me the whole time. If he saw me park, saw me hike in. Maybe he camps out there waiting for people like me, alone, vulnerable, out of touch. Or maybe he doesn't wait. Maybe he just watches. Maybe next time he won't. I was 34 the year I camped in the graveyard behind Milhaven Church. It wasn't some dare or test of courage. It wasn't even about saving money or trying to live rough for a while. The truth is, I just needed a quiet place where no one would come looking for me. Not the police, not my ex, not my old boss. No one. It was October 2022. I'd been laid off from my job in Bristol 2 months earlier. I'd worked security at a construction site, mostly night shifts. The company folded after some legal trouble that I didn't want anything to do with. My savings didn't last long. I'd been sleeping out of a van I bought cheap off Facebook Marketplace. Barely ran. By the time I reached a small town called Milhaven, the van had started making noises I didn't like, and I knew I wouldn't get much farther. I parked it behind a half-collapsed barn just outside of town, near a single narrow lane that led through the woods. I was out of options, so I walked. I had my pack on my back, just a sleeping bag, tarp, some cans of food, and a beat-up camping stove I'd stolen from a bloke in Exeter. It was getting dark. My boots were already soaked through from walking in wet grass all day. That's when I saw the graveyard. It was tucked behind the church like an afterthought. The church itself was still standing, barely. Stone walls streaked with moss, roof sagging in places, windows broken out. The graveyard had no gate. A low stone wall lined with thorny shrubs wrapped around it like a warning. The headstones leaned in strange directions. Some were cracked down the middle. Others had sunken into the ground almost completely. There were no flowers. No fresh dirt, no signs that anyone had visited in years. I didn't care. It was quiet. That was all I wanted. I climbed over the wall and found a flat patch of grass near the back, behind a row of tall, rectangular stones. One of them was chipped so badly the name had flaked away, just a year left on it. 1887. That suited me fine. I laid the tarp down and rolled out my sleeping bag on top of it. The ground was soft and spongy. It smelled like wet leaves and old dirt. The air had a damp bite to it, but I'd slept in worse. By the time I settled in, it was pitch dark. No lights from the church, none from the road. Just black woods in all directions. I clicked on my flashlight and checked the perimeter one more time. I wasn't scared, not exactly, but I wasn't relaxed either. Sleeping in a graveyard plays tricks on your head, even if you don't believe in all the ghost stories. Still, I figured it was just for the night. I ate a cold can of beans, lit a cigarette, then laid back and stared up at the sky. There were no stars, too much cloud cover. Just the smell of rot and wet stone all around me. I didn't sleep much. It wasn't noise that kept me up. It was the stillness. It was too quiet. I'd spent most of the last month sleeping near roads, under bridges, even one night behind a petrol station. There's always some sound out there. Cars in the distance, a dog barking, wind in the trees. But this place felt dead. No animals, no wind, not even the rustle of leaves. Just this weight pressing down on the dark like a thick blanket. And when I finally did drift off, I dreamed I was being buried alive. Dirt filling my mouth, my eyes, my nose. I woke up gagging. It was still dark. My flashlight was out, battery dead. I felt around for my phone and checked the time, 3:17 a.m. I didn't know why I'd woken up exactly. I didn't hear anything, but I had this crawling feeling in my gut, like something wasn't right. I sat up slowly, ears straining for any sound. My breath steamed in the cold. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not fast, not heavy. Just slow, deliberate steps crunching through the wet grass. At first, I thought maybe someone else was camping nearby. Or maybe a late-night walker or a drunk from town had wandered up here. But the steps were too steady, too cautious. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped. I couldn't see anything. The graveyard was thick with trees and shadow. I could barely make out the tops of the headstones. Then the footsteps started again. This time closer. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just sat there in the dark, trying to blend into the cold ground. They kept coming, circling around where I was lying. It was like whoever it was didn't want to be seen, just wanted to be heard. The steps moved behind me, then stopped again. I stayed frozen like that for what felt like hours. Eventually, the footsteps faded away into the trees. When the sun came up, I got up fast and packed everything. My tarp was soaked through, and there were muddy footprints just a few feet from where I'd been sleeping. I followed them with my eyes. They led between two graves, then vanished into the woods behind the church. I told myself it was nothing, just someone from town. Maybe they were walking their dog. Maybe they were just drunk and stumbled into the graveyard by mistake. But I didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe because the van was out of fuel. Maybe because I had nowhere else to go. Or maybe because part of me wanted to understand what had happened. That crawling feeling hadn't left. It felt like something had started that night, and walking away wouldn't end it. I stayed another night. I moved to a different corner of the graveyard, deeper in near the tree line. I cleared a patch beside a collapsed stone cross and set up again. I found a fresh branch and sharpened one end with my knife, just in case. I kept it close to me when I went to sleep. But I didn't sleep. That night, the footsteps came back. But they didn't stop nearby. They circled the entire graveyard. They started on one side, disappeared for a while, then reappeared on the other side. Over and over again. It wasn't just someone walking through. It was like they were pacing, like they were checking the borders, testing. At one point, I thought I saw something move between two stones. I held my breath. It was tall, hunched, barely a silhouette in the dark. Then it was gone again. By morning, I was shaking. I hadn't slept at all. My teeth hurt from clenching them. I stood up and walked to where I thought I'd seen the figure.
No footprints.
No broken branches. Just grass, stone, and old dirt. Still, I didn't leave. I don't know what kept me there. Felt like leaving would mean losing, like I had to finish whatever this was. I spent the day searching the area. I walked through every corner of the graveyard. I found newer graves in the far back 1990s, early 2000s. One of them had a wooden cross instead of stone. No name on it, no date. Behind the graveyard, I found something else. An old path, half overgrown, led deeper into the woods. It wasn't wide, maybe 2 feet across, but it had clearly been used. The grass was bent, and there were faint tracks in the mud. I followed it. It led to a clearing, maybe 100 yards into the trees. At the center was a pit. It wasn't wide, but it was deep, maybe 6 feet, maybe more. There was a rope hanging down into it, tied to a tree. The walls of the pit were straight and smooth, like someone had cut into the dirt with tools. I didn't go down. There was something about the pit that made my skin go cold. It wasn't just that it was hidden. It was that it looked fresh. The dirt piled at the sides wasn't overgrown. No leaves had gathered in it. Someone had dug it recently. That night, I didn't sleep in the graveyard. I dragged my gear into the church itself and barricaded the door with some broken pews. I didn't light a fire. I didn't turn on a light. I just sat in the dark, gripping my sharpened stick and listening. This time, the footsteps didn't come from the graveyard. They came from inside the church. I heard them just after midnight. Slow, scraping steps on the stone floor. Not heavy, bare feet maybe. I pressed myself into the corner and didn't move. The steps circled the main room, moving between the empty pews. Then they stopped right outside the doorway I was in. I didn't look. I don't know how long they stood there, but eventually they moved away. When the sun came up, I left. I didn't pack. I didn't check the graveyard. I didn't look for tracks. I just ran. I ran down the lane, through the trees, back to the barn where I'd left the van. I didn't stop until I reached it. I pried open the door, threw my gear in, and tried the ignition. Coughed once, then started. I drove until the tank hit empty and coasted to a stop in the next town. I've never been back to Milhaven. I never told anyone about what I saw. There was no one to tell, and even if there was, what would I say? That I heard footsteps in a graveyard? That someone was watching me from behind the headstones? That there was a pit in the woods no one had filled in? It sounds like nothing, but it wasn't. I don't camp anymore. I don't sleep outside. I don't walk alone at night. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I wake up in the dark, I swear I hear them again. The footsteps, still slow, still steady, still looking for something. I went camping alone in early October of 2017, up near a stretch of woods outside a village called Cawthorne in South Yorkshire. I was 34 back then, working long hours at a warehouse job in Wakefield. I hadn't taken a proper break in over a year. It was one of those long shifts where you start losing track of time, and your body's always a bit sore, always a bit behind. So I took a week off, packed light, and decided I'd spend 3 days in the woods on my own. I didn't want to drive too far, just somewhere quiet where I could breathe. I picked that stretch of woods because I remembered walking it years ago during a cold spring. It had a few trails, not too popular, and there was a small water reservoir nearby. I liked the feel of it, secluded but not too wild. The land there rolls a bit, not quite hilly, but uneven enough that you could hike a bit and get winded. I brought a small green tent, a warm sleeping bag, and a few basic tools: compass, pocket knife, matches, 2 torches, and a folding shovel. I also had food that didn't need cooking: oatcakes, canned beans, beef jerky, and a thermos for tea. I wanted quiet, not the full survivalist experience. I didn't tell many people, just left a message with my sister, letting her know I'd be off-grid for a few days. She didn't ask questions. She never does. I arrived around noon, parked along a dirt pull-off near a dead-end road that faded into grass. There was a barely visible walking path that cut through low trees and overgrown brambles. The sky was gray but not yet threatening, just that dull English overcast. I pulled on my backpack, locked the car, and stepped into the brush. The air felt heavier in the trees. I always liked that feeling, how the world gets quieter, like everything slows down. I walked for about an hour, maybe more, following faint old markers until I reached a clearing I had marked out years ago on an old ordnance survey map. The clearing sat on slightly raised ground with a slope behind it that led to a dip in the forest. There was a line of trees that curved around one side like a wall. The other side had a view down into a narrow valley with a little stream threading through it. I pitched my tent facing the slope so I could see the treetops and sky. Took about 20 minutes. Then I sat and listened. Birds somewhere deep, a squirrel darting, and nothing else. It was good. I stayed that first day in the area. Just walked small loops around the clearing, gathered some dead branches, watched the fog roll in from the low areas as it always does when the ground cools. I went to bed early, slept with a torch beside me and my bag zipped high. The second day, I decided to hike down toward the reservoir. I hadn't remembered exactly how far it was, but I figured I'd head south and cut down the ridge. I didn't bring much, just water, a little food, and my torch. I followed the slope until the trees opened again into a second clearing that was even more quiet than the first. The ground there was softer, full of fallen leaves that hadn't been walked on in years. I saw deer tracks. I also noticed an old fence that ran partially around the clearing. Iron bars in the ground, rusted, snapped in places. Nothing was connected anymore, just rotting posts half buried in soil. I paused there, not for any reason I could explain. It was just a different kind of silence. The birds didn't chirp in that spot. The wind didn't move the trees. I left the area quickly and moved downhill, where the sound of the stream picked up again. I found the reservoir not long after. It was still no movement, with a mist floating above it like smoke. There were no boats, no signs, just water and woods. I didn't stay long. I felt off, not scared, just unsettled. I returned to camp by mid-afternoon. The sun was already low. I sat outside the tent and boiled water for tea. I thought I saw movement along the slope, near the edge of the trees. I figured it was a fox, or maybe one of those black and white feral cats people see near farmland. It didn't show itself again. That night, the wind came through stronger. I zipped my tent fully, slipped inside my sleeping bag, and left the torch near my face, switched off. I heard sticks snap outside around midnight. Not heavy ones, just the small dry kind that break under pressure. I stayed still, listened. It wasn't deer. The pattern was too slow. One crunch, then nothing, then another, then quiet. I didn't open the flap. I didn't want to know. I lay awake for at least an hour, maybe more. Then it stopped. No more movement. I drifted into shallow sleep and woke stiff and cold just before sunrise. On the third day, I saw the man. It started the same. Mist low in the valley, sky dull, everything soaked with dew. I packed a few things and went to walk again. I told myself I'd hike one last loop, eat early lunch, and then start packing up to leave. I walked north this time, toward a denser part of the forest where the trees stood taller and closer together. It was darker in there. My boots sunk deeper into the soft ground. I kept my steps quiet. The air smelled damp, like dead leaves and wet bark. That's where I saw him, standing maybe 30 feet away, half blocked by a tree, just on the edge of a small glade I hadn't noticed before. He was motionless, not crouching, not moving, just standing. He wore dark trousers and a heavy coat that looked brown or green. His boots were caked with mud. He had something slung over his shoulder, a bag maybe, but I couldn't tell. His face was turned just slightly away. Couldn't make it out. I stopped walking, didn't make a sound. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't on a trail. This part of the woods wasn't marked. No one should have been there. I waited, just watching him, thinking maybe he'd turn or move or do something, but he didn't. He just stood there like he'd been standing for hours, or days. After a long time, I stepped back slowly. My boots squelched in the ground. I turned around and walked back toward my camp, not fast, but with my chest tight. I looked behind me a few times. The trees were still. Nothing moved. When I reached the tent, I packed as fast as I could. I didn't sit or eat. I didn't stop to check anything. I shoved my gear into the pack, collapsed the poles, wrapped the canvas, and slung everything onto my back. I left the site clean. I didn't want to leave a trace. I didn't want him to follow. The hike back was slower. I stuck to the path but kept turning to check behind me. The trees were full of movement now. Birds lifting, branches swaying. Normal sounds, but every one of them made me flinch. I felt watched the whole way out. I reached the car mid-afternoon. I threw my pack in the back seat and drove. I didn't stop until I was halfway home. Then I pulled into a petrol station, locked the doors, and just sat there for a few minutes with my hands gripping the wheel. My shirt was damp with sweat. My legs ached from the rush. I didn't even remember half the walk. I never found out who he was. I didn't tell anyone. I thought about it, but what would I say? There wasn't a crime. There wasn't proof. Just a man in the woods standing still, too far off the path. Not moving, not blinking, not right. Weeks later, I went online and searched the area. Reports, local news, forums, missing persons, anything. Nothing turned up.
No sightings.
No hikers lost. No bodies found. I looked up old boundaries, land records, woodland maintenance logs. Nothing mentioned that old fence. No one talked about the glade. No maps marked it. I never camped alone again. I still hike sometimes, but only in busy places with well-worn trails. I keep a second phone on me now. I carry more gear, and I never stay in one spot longer than a day. The man never moved. That's what haunts me the most. Not that he chased me, not that he spoke, but that he stood there in silence in a forgotten part of the woods and watched, like he was waiting for something. Or maybe for me. And the worst part, the part one don't like thinking about, is how his boots were pointed straight at me, even though his head was turned away, like he already knew I was there. My name is Ray Morgan. This happened in the fall of 2016 in a remote part of northern Montana, about 2 hours outside Libby, close to the Cabinet Mountains. I was 39 back then, just getting back into hunting after taking a few years off. Life had gotten too busy with work. My knees weren't what they used to be, and my focus had shifted to other things. But something inside me kept missing the quiet of the woods, the long mornings in the cold, and that stillness that only comes when you're truly away from everything. So I planned a solo hunting trip. For nights, deep in the forest, away from cell service, away from noise, away from people. It was mule deer season, and the weather had finally cooled down after a warm September. The timing felt right. I packed light but brought everything I needed: .308 rifle, gear, a simple canvas tent, food rations, a butane stove, and a Garmin GPS. I'd scouted this area the year before and marked a few spots on the map where I'd seen heavy deer sign. I left my truck at a trailhead where the dirt road ended. From there, I hiked 6 miles up into the ridges until I reached a small clearing by a dry creek bed. That first day was just about getting settled. I pitched my tent under a thick stand of lodgepole pine, arranged my gear, cleared out a space for a fire, and cooked some canned chili while the sun dropped low and the shadows stretched long across the ground. That night, the temperature dipped hard. The fire burned down to glowing coals, and I crawled into my sleeping bag wearing thermal layers and a wool cap. The first 2 days went exactly how I wanted. Mornings started before dawn. I'd hike up to a high point near the West Ridge, glass the tree lines, look for movement, then drop into lower areas where the deer might be feeding. I saw a few does and one buck too small to shoot, but I didn't care. It wasn't about filling the tag for me. I was just happy to be back out there, walking ridges, breathing in that cold air. The world back home felt far away. Everything was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get in a place untouched by roads and machines. I moved slow, careful to leave no scent. My boots left soft prints in dry leaves. Squirrels darted around and birds called out in the morning light. I never saw another person or heard another shot. Felt like I had the whole forest to myself. But something changed on the third night. Started subtle. After dinner, I was sitting by the fire sharpening my skinning knife, listening to the usual forest sounds. The wind through the trees, the rustle of branches, the crackle of firewood. Then I heard something off. Just a little sound at first. A branch snapping maybe 50 feet from camp. Not loud, not close enough to be urgent, but it caught my attention. I stopped sharpening, listened, waited. Nothing else came. I figured it was a deer moving through, or maybe a raccoon sniffing around. I didn't hear anything after that, and the woods went back to their usual rhythm. I went to bed around 9 p.m., still thinking about it. Later that night, maybe after midnight, I woke up needing to piss. The air in the tent felt colder than usual, still as ice. I unzipped the tent door and stepped out into the dark, flashlight in hand. The fire had burned out. Everything was black. I walked a few yards from the tent and stood facing the trees, relieving myself. That's when I heard something again. A crunch, a footstep, but not the quick scurry of an animal. It was deliberate, heavy, like someone stepping slowly over dry leaves, then stopping. I froze. The light from my flashlight barely reached past the nearby trees. I swept it left, then right. Nothing. No eyes, no movement. Just that silence. I stood there a while longer, not moving, listening. Eventually, I told myself it was nothing and climbed back into the tent. But sleep didn't come easy. I kept listening, waiting to hear another sound. But it stayed quiet the rest of the night. The next morning, I got up before sunrise and made coffee over the little stove. I tried to brush off the nerves. Maybe it was a black bear. Maybe just a tree limb breaking off in the wind. Nothing had been disturbed around camp. My food bag was still hanging high in the tree where I'd strung it the night before. Everything was in its place. Still, something didn't feel right. I kept scanning the woods as I drank my coffee. Then I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A boot print, not mine. It was faint but clear enough in the soft dirt near the edge of camp, about 20 feet from my tent. The tread was different from mine, and the shape was longer, thinner. It looked like someone had stood there for a bit, then turned around. My stomach turned when I saw it. I didn't hear or see anyone the whole day. I left camp as usual, rifle slung over my shoulder, and hunted along the ridge. I didn't spot any deer. The woods were oddly still. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. I was distracted, checking over my shoulder every hour, stopping often to listen. Every branch that cracked sounded louder than it should. Every gust of wind felt like it was hiding something. That night, I kept the fire going longer than usual. I didn't want to sit in the dark. I sat with my back to the tent and watched the trees, scanning them over and over. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Around 10 p.m., I finally crawled into the tent, but I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid there, boots still on, rifle by my side, waiting. I must have dozed off because I woke up again in the middle of the night. This time, I didn't hear anything right away. I just had that feeling, like someone was nearby, like I was being watched. I slowly unzipped the tent and peeked out. The fire had gone out. Moonlight lit up part of the clearing. And there, at the edge of the trees just past the light, I saw a figure. A man, standing still, not moving, just watching. I couldn't make out details, his face, his clothes, just the shape of him. Tall, still, not approaching, not retreating, just there. I didn't move. I stayed frozen, trying to breathe quiet. I thought about yelling, but my throat was dry. I reached slowly for the rifle beside me and pulled it close. When I looked back, the figure was gone, just vanished into the woods. I sat like that the rest of the night, heart pounding, scanning the trees. But I never saw him again. To first light, I packed up camp fast. I stuffed my gear into my bag, took down the tent in record time, and didn't even bother cooking breakfast. I just wanted out. But as I started the hike back down, I noticed more boot prints. Not mine, not from the way I came up. They circled my camp, twice. Some led into the woods, parallel to the trail I had used the day before. Whoever it was had been watching me longer than I realized.
I hiket fast.
kept my rifle ready. I didn't stop to rest or eat, just pushed through the 6 miles until I reached my truck. When I finally got back to the dirt road, I saw something that stopped me cold. There were tire tracks in the mud, fresh ones, leading away from where I had parked. My truck was untouched, still locked, nothing stolen. But someone else had driven up to that spot while I was in the woods. Someone knew I was up there. I left fast, drove down the dirt road without stopping. I didn't say anything to the rangers, didn't report anything. I couldn't describe the man. I couldn't prove anything. There was no crime, just a feeling in my gut I still can't shake. That trip changed how I see the woods. I still go hunting, but never alone, never that deep. And I always let someone know where I'm going, when I'll be back. Because out there, it's not the animals you need to worry about. It's the people, the quiet ones, the ones who don't want to be found, and the ones who are already there, watching you, before you even realize you're not alone. It was late September 2016 when I took a solo trip out to the Uintahs in northeastern Utah. I was 29 at the time, working a construction job in Ogden, and I had just finished a long month of overtime. My girlfriend and I had broken up 2 weeks before, and I'd been living alone in a half-finished rental where the power went out every time I ran the microwave and the heater together. I needed to get away from all of it. I camped a lot as a teenager and even more in my early 20s. But lately, I hadn't had the time. That fall, though, I craved isolation. No signal, no noise, no city. Just space. I packed everything I thought I'd need. My old tent, cooking gear, water filter, freeze-dried food, a bear canister, even some MREs. I loaded it all into the back of my Tacoma and drove out early on a Thursday morning. The hike I picked started at a trailhead just off a forest road, a little over 3 hours from town. I'd never been to this exact part of the mountains before, but I had a good topo map, a compass, and a full charge on my GPS. The plan was simple. Park, hike in about 7 miles to a lake I'd seen on the map, set up camp near the water, and stay 3 nights. No other trails led to the lake. It was tucked far in behind a steep ridge, so I was counting on not seeing a soul the whole time. The drive went smooth. I stopped at a gas station in a town called Hannah, filled up, grabbed a sandwich, and didn't see another car for the last 45 minutes of the trip. The trailhead wasn't marked except for a faded sign nailed to a dead tree. I parked the truck off the road, left a note on the dash with the date and time I expected to be back, shouldered my pack, and started up the trail around 10 a.m. The weather was perfect. Cool air, cloudless sky, not even much wind. The trail was narrow but easy to follow. It snaked through lodgepole pine and aspen, then cut across a dried-up creek bed before climbing gradually toward the ridge. The only sounds were my own footsteps, the occasional squirrel, and the distant caws of crows overhead. It took about 4 hours to reach the ridge. My legs were burning, and I took a long break at the top. From there, I could see the lake below, small, still, deep blue, surrounded on all sides by forest. No signs of other camps, no footprints, no wrappers or beer cans, nothing. It felt untouched. I dropped down the other side and reached the lake around 3:30 in the afternoon. Found a spot tucked between some large boulders and a thick patch of pine. There was a small natural clearing perfect for the tent. I set up camp quickly. Tent up, bear canister stashed a good distance away, water filtered from the lake, and firewood gathered even though I didn't plan to make fires every night. Just one on the first evening, I told myself. For comfort, the first night was peaceful. I ate a hot meal and sat near the fire as the last light faded from the sky. No bugs, no sounds but the wind. By 9 p.m., it was pitch black, and I crawled into the tent. I read for a bit, then fell asleep with my flashlight still in my hand. I woke once in the night, Thought I heard something moving in the trees, but it was faint, and I figured it was just a deer or an elk, maybe even a porcupine. I rolled over and drifted back to sleep. The next day was uneventful, but in the best kind of way. I hiked around the lake, fished for a bit, though I didn't catch anything, then climbed up a short ridge and just sat, watching the sun cut through the trees. That night, I skipped the fire and ate cold food, slept early. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard the noise again. This time it was louder. I sat up, heart going fast. Something had snapped a branch near the tent. I waited, listening. Nothing for a minute. Then another snap closer. I unzipped the tent and shined my light outside. The trees were silent, unmoving. I scanned left and right, saw nothing. No eyes, no movement. Still, I got out, checked the area around the tent, then checked the bear canister. It hadn't been touched. I went back inside and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. In the morning, I looked for tracks. I didn't see any. No claw marks on the trees, no scat, no fur. I told myself it had to be a deer. Maybe it had wandered through and left quietly. That day, I decided to hike further down the lake, just to get my mind off it. I followed the shoreline until it curved east and the trees got denser. As I moved through a narrow part of the forest, I noticed something strange. A tree had been stripped of its bark, but not like by a bear. The bark had been peeled carefully in long strips, and the exposed wood underneath was clean. It looked deliberate. I found another tree the same way 30 feet later. Then another. I didn't like it. The skin of the trees reminded me of something I didn't want to admit. I turned back after that. That night, I couldn't relax. I kept the flashlight in my hand and a small hatchet next to me. I left the tent flap open so I could see out through the mesh. I didn't want to be blind to anything moving around. At 1:41 a.m., I remember the time exactly. I heard footsteps. Not four-legged, not soft. Crunching steps. Bipedal. I froze. The steps moved slowly between the trees. Not fast, not sneaky. Just deliberate. Like someone was walking a slow circle around the camp. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. Then they stopped. Silence. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. I didn't dare move. The flashlight was off. I was relying on the moonlight coming through the trees. Then I saw it. Not clearly, just movement. Something passed between two trees, about 40 feet away. It wasn't wearing anything bright, just pale arms and legs, thin, wiry. It was too fast to make out details, but it moved wrong. The knees bent weird. The arms looked too long. I didn't know what I was looking at. My brain kept switching between that's a person and no, that's not right. Then I didn't see anything else for the rest of the night. The next morning, I packed everything in less than 15 minutes. I didn't eat, didn't even fill my water bottles. I just grabbed what I could and hiked out as fast as my legs would let me. But that's not where it ends, because halfway up the ridge, maybe 2 hours from the lake, I found something. A shirt. It was hung up in a tree branch like it had been placed there. Old, sun-faded, torn in the back. It wasn't mine. I didn't recognize the brand or the size. There was dirt on the collar and something dark down the front. I didn't touch it, just stared at it for a long time and then kept walking. I moved faster after that. Every squirrel that rustled a branch, every bird that chirped, made me jump. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that thing again. But I didn't. The trail eventually led me back to the dry creek bed, then through the aspens, and finally back to the dirt road where I'd left the truck. The Tacoma was untouched. I threw everything in the back and didn't stop driving until I hit cell service. I didn't report anything. I didn't know what to say. The next week, I looked up missing person reports from that area. I found one from 2014. A guy named Travis went missing in the same range. No one ever found his body. They said he was hiking solo. They said he was experienced. I think about that shirt sometimes, about the stripped trees, about those steps circling my tent. I haven't been back since. I still hike sometimes, but never alone, and never off trail. Something's out there, something that walks like us, watches like us, but it isn't us. And if you ask me what it was, I'll just say this: some things wear skin better than others, and some things wear it just wrong enough that you notice when it's already too late. I was 32 when I decided to take a week off from everything. I had some money saved, didn't know anyone anything, wasn't in a relationship, and didn't care to be. It was late August of 2017, and the air in northern British Columbia was just starting to cool down at night. I picked a spot way out past Burns Lake, deep in a patch of forest that used to be part of an old logging road. You'd miss the turnoff if you weren't looking for it. No signs, just a gap in the tree line and a rough slope covered in brush. I had an old Dodge pickup, no 4x4, so I parked it at the beginning of the overgrown road and hiked in. The area hadn't been touched for decades from what I could tell. Trees had taken over, and most of the old road was swallowed by roots, moss, and rain erosion. I had a heavy backpack with a tent, food, water filter, and everything else I thought I'd need for 6 days alone. I didn't bring a gun, just bear spray and a hatchet. The reason I chose that area was because I had a map from my uncle. He used to work forestry back in the day. The map showed where a small logging operation had run in the 80s and marked a creek with clear water, an old cabin site, and an equipment shed that might still be standing. That kind of thing always appealed to me. I didn't want tourist trails. I wanted forgotten places, real wilderness. And that's what I got. The first day was peaceful. The silence was heavy, only broken by the crunch of my boots and the occasional creak of branches in the wind. I reached the spot marked cabin just before sunset. There was no cabin, but I found the stone base where it had stood. Just a rectangle of moss-covered foundation stones and a rusted old stove off to one side. I pitched my tent near it, thinking it'd be a good anchor point. The creek was about 40 feet away, flowing slow and clear. Perfect. I built a small fire that night and cooked a tin of stew. The stars were out thick, and there was no light anywhere. I didn't even bring my phone. No signal anyway. I wanted total disconnection. That first night, I slept hard. Dead silence. The second day, I hiked farther down what remained of the old road, curved west and dipped down into a gully. The trees got denser and darker. I saw some prints in the mud, maybe moose or elk. One set looked human, but the shape was wrong. The toes were pointed outward at a wide angle, and the stride was uneven. Maybe some logging boots with cracks, I thought. I didn't dwell on it. About a mile from camp, I found what was left of the equipment shed. It was mostly collapsed, but one wall stood with some iron brackets and cables still nailed into it. I poked around, hoping for something interesting. All I found were splinters of wood and an old saw blade half buried in dirt. No tools, no junk left behind. Strange for a site abandoned decades ago. Usually there's rusted cans, scraps of metal. This place was cleaner than I expected. That night, I stayed close to the fire. Something about the silence felt different. Couldn't place it. There were no insects chirping, no birds calling before sunset. I'd camped in dozens of places before, and even the quietest ones had some kind of sound in the evening. This didn't. It was like everything around me had gone still. I stayed up longer than usual and added wood to the fire in small bits to keep it burning steady. I didn't want a big blaze, just enough light to see a little past the edge of my camp. Around midnight, I heard movement beyond the creek, just a shuffle, a break of twigs. I held my breath. It didn't come closer. I convinced myself it was a deer, maybe a bear sniffing for scraps. I didn't leave any food out, though. I didn't sleep that well. On the third day, I woke up tired and sore. My back ached like I'd slept on rocks. But I remembered laying my sleeping pad flat. When I looked under the tent, I saw the rocks had been moved, like someone had rolled them around under the tent during the night. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I told myself maybe the ground had shifted from water or some animal digging nearby. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I spent the day gathering wood, fixing the fire ring with extra stones, and doubling the tent pegs. I also rigged up a noise trap with a string and some old tin I'd found by the stove, just enough to rattle if someone or something moved past it. I didn't usually do that. I never needed to, but something felt wrong, and I couldn't shake it. That night, the fire burned low, and I sat with the hatchet across my legs. My legs were stiff. My hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. I didn't hear anything at first, but I felt something, like being watched. That deep gut sense you can't explain, but you know it's real. Then I heard the tin rattle, just once. A soft clink, followed by silence. I froze. The hair on my neck stood up, and I didn't move for several minutes. I strained my ears. Nothing, just silence again. I stayed up until dawn, never leaving the tent, just sitting in the dark with my hand on the hatchet. The fourth day, I checked the trap. The string had been pulled, not snapped, but moved just enough that it had gone slack. The tin had been picked up and set down, not dropped. There were no prints, no signs of animals. I decided I was done.
Ipacket fast.
Tent, food, gear, everything went into the bag. I didn't eat, just drank water and got moving. The path out was longer than I remembered. The trees were closer. Every time I turned, I thought I saw movement in the corner of my vision. Nothing ever stayed long enough to focus on. Just flickers, shadows between trunks. I kept walking. About halfway back to the truck, I passed a tree with a mark on it. A deep gouge, long and clean like someone had dragged a knife or blade down the trunk. It wasn't there 3 days ago. I would have noticed. Then I saw another one. Same shape, same height. Then another, 10 feet apart, like a trail. They led straight down toward the old gully, away from the path out. I didn't follow them. When I reached the truck, I tossed the pack in the bed and didn't look back. I drove 2 hours before stopping. I didn't feel safe until I hit pavement again. When I got home, I dumped everything in the garage and didn't touch it for days. The gear smelled wrong, like wet soil and iron. I threw the tent out, burned the clothes. A week later, I looked up logging records for that area. The site wasn't on any recent maps, not even satellite ones. The last official record was from 1986. They stopped operations early, citing unfavorable terrain and safety concerns. No details. I still think about it sometimes. The prints, the moved rocks, the string, the scratches on the trees, and the quiet, how everything just stopped moving around me. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like something else had claimed the place after the loggers left. I haven't camped alone since. I still go out sometimes with friends close to town, where I can see the highway or a gas station light through the trees. But deep forest? No way. Something was in that patch of woods. Something that didn't want me there. And I listened. My name is Mark Dawson. I was 34 years old at the time, and it was the summer of 2016 when this happened. I had taken some time off work from the cabinet shop I ran with my cousin in northern Minnesota. I'd been grinding 6 days a week for almost 2 years straight, and after finally finishing a massive order of kitchen sets for a hotel remodel, I told him I was going off the grid for a few days to recharge. I chose a secluded patch of forest near the Minnesota-Wisconsin border, not far from a narrow creek called Mudjaw Run. It wasn't a campground. It wasn't marked. It wasn't even listed on most local maps. I had found it years back while hunting, and I always remembered it being quiet, green, and untouched. Most people passed it by because it sat a good 20 miles from the nearest paved road and had no signal, no power, nothing but woods and water. I loaded up my Tacoma with a canvas tent, enough food for 4 days, a cooler of water, fishing gear, a .38 revolver I kept more out of habit than need, and a pair of boots I trusted more than anything. I reached the trailhead early in the morning, hiked 4 miles through trees that closed in overhead, and finally reached the bend in the creek where I'd camped before. Everything was just like I remembered it. The slope of the bank, the broken log where I used to sit and fish, and even a rusted tin can stuck halfway in the mud that hadn't moved in all those years. I set up camp quickly. Tent under the biggest cedar, a ring of stones for a fire, and my cooler partly buried under leaves to keep it shaded. I didn't bother with my phone because I knew I wouldn't have signal out here. That was the point. No calls.
No texts.
Just wind in the trees and the smell of pine needles warming in the sun. The first day passed the way I wanted it to. I fished a little, ate jerky and apples, drank cold water straight from the creek after boiling it, and watched dragonflies flick around like sparks. At night, I made a small fire and sat there until the stars came out. I didn't even realize how much noise the city had drilled into me until I felt it all missing. No hum of power lines, no passing cars, just the occasional rustle from animals doing their thing in the underbrush. It wasn't until the second night that things started to feel off. I was lying in my tent sometime past midnight, probably closer to 2 in the morning. I hadn't fallen asleep yet. My body was tired, but my mind was still going, stuck thinking about work and everything I was trying to leave behind. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a big noise. It was soft, barely there. But once you're alone in the dark and your ears tune in, you start catching things you wouldn't in daylight. It was a click, like wood snapping under weight. Not close, but not far either. Maybe 30 yards off, deeper in the woods. First, I brushed it off. Could have been a raccoon. Could have been a deer. Could have been anything. Then came another one. Same sound. A single crack, like a dry branch being stepped on. Then another. I sat up in my sleeping bag, zipped the tent halfway down, and looked out. Everything was pitch black beyond the fire pit, which had burned out long ago. I didn't have a lantern on, just my headlamp, and I didn't turn it on yet. I just sat there, listening, trying to place the direction of the sound. My ears were straining so hard they started ringing. Then it stopped, for a while, long enough that I felt stupid for even sitting up. I lay back down, still tense, and stared at the roof of the tent until I drifted off. The next day, I tried to shake it off. I went for a long walk upstream, caught a few brook trout, came back, cooked them with some foil and salt over the fire. I was halfway through dinner when I noticed something odd. There were footprints on the other side of the creek. That side of the creek was thick with brush and uneven terrain. No trails, no reason for anyone to be over there unless they were cutting through off-path. But there they were, shapes pressed into the mud, deep enough to be fresh. 2 sets. Not boots, not paws. Sneakers, maybe. I couldn't make out details from where I was. But they were about the same size as mine. I stood there for a while, chewing the last bite of fish slowly, staring across the water. I didn't like the idea of someone watching me from the brush. I hadn't heard or seen anyone on the hike in, and it wasn't the kind of place folks just stumbled into by accident. I crossed the creek and checked the area, but the ground was too soft and messy to follow anything useful. I didn't find anyone.
No campsite. No trash.
Nothing. That night, I kept the fire going longer than usual. I had the revolver loaded and sitting near my foot. I didn't sleep much. I heard more of those same soft noises again. But this time they stopped and didn't come back. The next morning, something was missing. A coil of rope I'd brought was gone. Just gone. I tied it up on a branch beside the tent in case I needed to hang food or gear. It was a good 20 feet of bright orange paracord, hard to miss. At first I thought maybe I'd packed it away without thinking, but I turned over every bag, every box. It was gone, just like that. I tried to stay calm. I told myself maybe a raccoon had pulled it off or something, but there were no chew marks. The knot had been untied clean, like someone had used their hands. That's when I decided I wouldn't stay another night. I started packing everything up slowly. I figured I'd hike out in the late afternoon, take my time, and be back at the truck by nightfall. But then I noticed something that made me freeze. In the dirt beside the tent, half smudged and shallow, was a footprint, clearer than the ones across the creek. It looked like someone had walked right up to my tent and stood there for a while. I didn't wait. I packed up faster than I ever have in my life. I shoved everything in the bags without folding or organizing. The tent stayed partially collapsed. I just strapped it to my pack, slung everything over my back, and left the fire pit cold. I made it about 1.5 miles before I heard a noise that stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't the wind. It was a whistle. 3 short notes, slow, drawn out, coming from behind me. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, fast, focused, breathing hard but quiet. I didn't run, not yet, because I knew the trail was narrow and twisted. One wrong step and I'd break something or fall. Another whistle, closer, same tune. My hand stayed on the revolver. I could feel it inside the canvas pouch against my thigh. I hadn't drawn it yet, but my fingers were ready. Still, I didn't stop. I just kept going, my boots digging into the dirt, stepping over roots and rocks. Then I heard movement behind me. Real movement. Quick, heavy steps. Like someone jogging to catch up. That's when I started running. I didn't think. I just moved. I tore down that path with everything I had. Heart pounding in my throat. Lungs burning. The forest flew by in a blur of green and brown. I slipped once and hit my knee hard against a root but didn't stop. When I finally reached the trailhead, I could see my truck through the trees. I've never been so relieved to see that dull blue paint in my life. I didn't stop moving until I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed out of that gravel lot faster than I should have. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't care. I drove until I had signal again. I pulled into a gas station 20 miles out, sat in the parking lot, and just sat there breathing. I didn't call anyone. I didn't file a report. What would I say? That someone stalked me in the woods, took my rope, stood at my tent, and followed me whistling? They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd think I imagined it. I never went back to that spot. I told my cousin we needed to do our next camping trip closer to home, near populated areas. I still camp sometimes, but I don't go alone. Not anymore. What stuck with me most wasn't the noise or the footprint, or even the missing rope. It was the whistle. 3 slow notes. Not a song. Not anything I recognized. Just a sound. Pattern. Like they wanted me to know they were there. Like they wanted me to remember. And I do. I remember every time I close my eyes.